They say the higher you climb, the harder you fall. But for Islay Vance, the fall was just the beginning of her ascent. It was supposed to be the best day of her life. Instead, she stood at the doors of MacAlister Global, staring at a screen that had just shattered her world. 2 years of love, 2 years of supporting Hamish Boyd through every struggle, erased by a single text. Don't bother coming up. I've traded the copper for gold. I don't date commoners. Before the tears could even dry, the internet finished the job. Hamish had posted a photo with a socialite, labeling Islay a leech and a stalker. The girl who had nothing was now being hunted by a digital mob. But Hamish made one fatal mistake. He forgot that every wolf has a master. Driven by a fury she didn't know she possessed, Islay didn't run. She went to the only man in the city Hamish feared, his uncle, the ruthless Alpha CEO, Lachlan MacAlister. She didn't go for a job. She went for a weapon. Lachlan didn't ask for her resume. He smelled the storm in her blood. He pinned her to the wall and offered her a contract that would change the Highlands forever. Marry me for 2 years. I get a wife to satisfy the board, and you get a name that will make Hamish kneel. Islay signed her soul away in blood, never realizing that she wasn't just marrying into a family. She was reclaiming a throne. Because Islay Vance isn't a commoner. She is the last of a forbidden bloodline, and her revenge is about to turn the Highlands into a battlefield. Hamish thought he threw away a beggar. He's about to find out he just crowned his queen. Don't even think about stepping inside this building, Islay. We are finished. Islay Vance froze at the entrance of MacAlister Global. The glass doors reflected a girl who looked like she belonged in a boardroom, but the text on her phone told a different story. It was from Hamish Boyd, the man she had supported through 2 years of university, the man she thought she would marry. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Before she could type a reply, her phone rang. It was her friend, Mary. Islay, tell me you aren't looking at his page, Mary whispered. Her voice sounded like she was at a funeral. Islay opened her social media app. The image loaded instantly. It was Hamish. He was at an exclusive rooftop bar, his arm draped around a woman in a designer silk dress. The caption read, "Finally traded the copper for gold. To the girls who think a night in my bed earns them a ring, stop dreaming. I don't date commoners." The air left Islay's lungs. She felt the eyes of the security guards on her. She felt the judgment of every person walking past her on the street. With shaking fingers, she typed a comment. 2 years, Hamish. You told me you loved me. You told me we were a team. The response was instant. It was a digital execution. Hamish Boyd replied, 2 years of me feeling sorry for a penniless orphan. You were a maid with benefits, Islay. Go back to the gutter where I found you. Below his comment, the internet joined in. The words gold digger and desperate flashed across her screen in a blur of hate. Islay didn't cry. The pain was too deep for tears. It felt like a cold stone settling in her chest. She looked up at the towering skyscraper. Hamish was up there, laughing at her. You want a gold digger, Hamish? She whispered. I'll show you what it looks like to lose everything. She didn't turn back toward the bus stop. Instead, she walked straight toward the VIP elevator. She knew the code. She had used it a dozen times to bring Hamish his favorite lunch. She punched the numbers in. The doors slid shut. The elevator climbed to the penthouse. When the doors opened, the office was dark. A heavy scent of cedar and rain filled the room. A hand reached out from the shadows. It gripped her waist and slammed her back against the mahogany wall. Islay gasped as a body pinned her in place. Lachlan MacAlister looked down at her. He was the CEO. He was the man the entire city feared. His eyes were a strange, glowing amber. He didn't look like a businessman. He looked like a predator. You are late, Lachlan growled. His voice was a low vibration that she felt in her bones. I'm not here for a job, Islay said. She tried to keep her voice steady. Lachlan leaned in. His face was inches from hers. He didn't look at her resume. He looked at the pulse jumping in her neck. I know why you are here. You are the girl my nephew just threw away. The one who is currently the most hated woman on the internet. He let go of her waist, but didn't move away. He paced the room like a caged animal. I have a problem, Islay. My board of directors thinks I am too unstable. They want me to marry a woman of their choosing. I refuse to let them control me. He stopped in front of her again. Marry me for 2 years. I will pay off your debts. I will give you a name that makes you untouchable. I will give you the power to crush Hamish Boyd into the dirt. Islay's heart hammered against her ribs. Why me? Because you have nothing left to lose, Lachlan said. And because your scent tells me you are more than a commoner. He reached out and cupped her jaw. His skin was unnaturally hot. Before she could speak, he leaned down. He kissed her. It wasn't a romantic gesture. It was a claim. It tasted of salt and power. When he pulled away, he slid a document across the desk. Sign it, Lachlan commanded. Sign it, and move your things into my estate tonight. You belong to the MacAlister name now. Islay grabbed the pen. She didn't read the fine print. She saw the image of Hamish's mocking face in her mind. She signed her name in bold, dark letters. Pack your bags, Islay. The war starts tomorrow. Get your filth off my sidewalk before I call the wardens. Islay stood in the pouring rain outside her flat. Her landlord, Mr. Garrow, tossed her last suitcase into a muddy puddle. He held his phone up to her face. The screen showed the video of Hamish's post. It already had 1 million views. I paid my rent for the month, Islay said. She wiped rain from her eyes. She reached for the suitcase, but Garrow kicked it away. I don't care about the money, Garrow snapped. The internet says you are a stalker and a leech. My other tenants don't feel safe with a girl like you under this roof. You are a stain on this building's reputation. He slammed the door and turned the bolt. Islay stood alone on the dark street. She had no family. She had no home. She dragged her heavy bag toward the local shelter. She hoped for a bed and a warm meal. The shelter was crowded and smelled of damp wool. As Islay sat on a plastic chair, a group of girls in nursing scrubs walked in. One of them was Elspeth, a girl Islay had helped with her exams just last week. Look at this, Elspeth laughed. She pointed her phone camera at Islay. The girl who thought she could marry a MacAlister is sleeping on a cot. Life comes at you fast when you're a gold digger. Stop it, Elspeth, Islay said. She tried to stand up, but the girls crowded around her. The whole university knows, Islay, Elspeth said. She leaned in close. They are revoking your scholarship. Why would they waste money on a girl who spends her time trying to sneak into rich men's beds? The girls cheered as Elspeth hit the upload button. Within seconds, Islay's phone buzzed with a notification from the school board. She was suspended. She was officially a social pariah. The shelter manager walked over. He looked at the girls' phones and then at Islay. You need to leave. We don't allow filming here, and you are causing a disturbance. Out. Islay walked back into the storm. She sat on a cold stone bench near the bus stop. Her body shook from the cold. She looked at her phone. She thought Lachlan MacAlister must have been a hallucination. Why would a king want to save a girl in the dirt? Her phone rang. It was an unknown number. She picked it up. Look toward the corner of the street, a deep voice commanded. It was Lachlan. A massive black Range Rover slid through the ring. It looked like a shark cutting through water. 2 men in dark suits stepped out. They didn't look like guards. They looked like soldiers. One of them held a large umbrella over her head. Miss Vance, the guard asked. The master is waiting. I have my things, Islay said. She pointed to her muddy suitcase. The guard didn't pick it up. The master said to leave it. He said nothing from your past is allowed to cross his threshold. Islay looked at the suitcase. It held everything she owned. Her books. Her old clothes. Her memories of Hamish. She turned her back on it and stepped into the car. The leather seats were heated. The air smelled of expensive wood and power. They drove away from the city. The car climbed high into the mist-covered hills. They passed through iron gates shaped like snarling wolves. The MacAlister Manor sat on a cliff. It was a fortress of gray stone and flickering torchlight. The car stopped. 2 rows of servants stood in the grand entrance. They all bowed as Islay stepped out. An older man with white hair walked forward. I am Greer, the head butler, he said. He bowed low. Master Lachlan has been pacing the library since you called. He does not like to be kept waiting. Islay followed him through halls filled with silver armor and oil paintings. The house felt alive. It felt like it was breathing. Greer opened 2 massive oak doors. Lachlan stood by a roaring fire. He turned around. His amber eyes swept over her soaked clothes and trembling hands. He didn't offer a blanket. He didn't offer a kind word. You look like a drowned rat, Lachlan said. He walked toward her. He stopped just inches away. He smelled the air around her. But you finally smell like you've let go of that boy. Are you ready to become a MacAlister? I'm ready to make them regret they ever knew my name, Islay said. Lachlan gave a dark, sharp smile. Good. Because in this house, we don't just win. We devour. Do not mistake my house for a sanctuary, Islay. It is a cage for my enemies. Lachlan MacAlister stood by the hearth, the firelight casting long, flickering shadows across his rugged face. He watched Islay with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He didn't look like a man about to get married. He looked like a general preparing for a siege. Islay stood her ground, despite the chill still clinging to her bones. I know it isn't a sanctuary, but a cage is better than the gutter. Lachlan grunted in approval. He signaled to Greer, who stepped forward with a silver tray. On it sat a heavy, leather-bound ledger and a ring. The ring was not gold. It was crafted from a dark, hammered metal with a single blood-red stone that seemed to glow in the dim light. Before we sign the blood oath, Lachlan said, his voice dropping to a low rumble, we set the terms. You will live here. You will attend every function at my side. You will play the part of a woman obsessed with her husband. And the bedroom? Islay asked. She kept her chin up. I told you. I will not share your bed. I am a partner, not a plaything. Lachlan stepped into her personal space. The heat coming off his body was incredible, like standing near a furnace. He looked down at her, his amber eyes swirling with an unreadable emotion. I have no interest in a woman who does not want to be in my bed. You have my word. Until you beg me to touch you, I will not. Islay felt a flash of heat in her cheeks. I won't be begging. We shall see, Lachlan whispered. He took her hand. His touch was electric, a jolt of energy that raced up her arm. He slid the heavy ring onto her finger. It felt strangely warm against her skin. He pressed a button on his desk. Within moments, the doors opened. A dozen staff members filed in. They stood in a perfect line, their expressions stony and disciplined. Witness this, Lachlan announced to the room. He took Islay's hand and held it high. Islay Vance is no longer a guest. She is the future matriarch of the MacAlister clan. Her word is my word. Her safety is the pack's priority. The staff bowed in unison. Yes, Alpha, they chanted. The word sent a shiver down Islay's spine. Alpha. It sounded ancient. It sounded dangerous. Lachlan dismissed the staff with a sharp wave of his hand. He turned back to the fire. Greer will show you to your quarters. Eat. Sleep. Tomorrow, the world finds out you belong to me. Greer led Islay out of the library. As they walked through the sprawling gallery, Islay stopped. Her breath caught in her throat. On the wall hung a massive, ornate gold frame. It was a family portrait. In the center sat an older woman with a face like cold marble. Standing behind her was Lachlan, and standing to his left, with a smug, arrogant grin that Islay knew all too well, was Hamish. That's Hamish, Islay whispered. Her heart began to race. Greer looked at the painting. Master Hamish Boyd. He is Master Lachlan's only nephew. His mother, Lady Mary, is the Master's sister. Islay felt the world tilt. She hadn't just married a rich man. She had married into the family of the man who had destroyed her. She was now the legal aunt of her own ex-boyfriend. Does Hamish know? Islay asked. Her voice was barely a breath. Master Hamish believes he is the sole heir to this estate, Greer said. He didn't look at her, but his voice was pointed. He believes no woman is good enough for his uncle. He believes he is the future of the MacAlister line. Islay looked back at the portrait. She saw the cruelty in Hamish's painted eyes. She realized why Lachlan had chosen her. It wasn't just because she was available. It was because she was the ultimate weapon to use against his nephew. She followed Greer to a massive bedroom suite. A tray of hot food waited for her, but she couldn't eat. She walked to the window and looked out at the dark Scottish Highlands. A howl echoed in the distance. It didn't sound like a dog. It sounded like a warning. There was a soft knock on the door. It wasn't Greer. The door creaked open, and a maid Islay hadn't seen before stepped in. She looked terrified. Miss, the maid whispered. You must be careful. Master Hamish is already on his way here. He saw the news of the engagement on the private family wire. Let him come, Islay said. She looked at the red stone on her finger. It felt like it was pulsing. You don't understand, the maid said, her eyes wide. He isn't coming to talk. He's coming to prove you aren't one of us. I suggest you hide the silver, Greer. My nephew has a habit of breaking things when he realizes he is no longer the favorite. Lachlan stood at the top of the grand staircase, watching the heavy front doors. Islay stood beside him, her hand resting on the cold stone balustrade. She could hear the roar of a high-powered engine screaming up the driveway. The sound was aggressive, a mechanical snarl that echoed through the quiet Highlands night. The doors burst open. Hamish Boyd stormed into the foyer, his expensive wool coat dripping with rain. He didn't look like the polished socialite from the Instagram photos. His face was flushed with a dark, ugly rage, and his eyes were wide with disbelief. "Uncle Lachlan," Hamish shouted. His voice cracked as it bounced off the high ceilings. "Tell me the news wire is a glitch. Tell me you haven't actually tied yourself to this scavenger." Lachlan didn't move. He didn't even blink. "You are dripping on the Persian rug, Hamish. Mind your manners." Hamish's gaze swung to Islay. He looked at her as if she were something he had scraped off his shoe. How did you even get past the gates? Did you crawl through the sewers?" Islay felt a surge of cold fire in her chest. She didn't shrink back. She stepped forward, letting the light catch the blood-red stone on her finger. "I walked through the front door, Hamish. The same way any mistress of this house would." Hamish stared at the ring. His jaw tightened so hard Islay heard the bone click. "That is the MacAlister crest. That ring belongs to the line of the Alpha. You have no right to touch it." "She has every right," Lachlan said. He descended the stairs slowly, his movements fluid and dangerous. He stopped on the step just above Hamish, looming over him. "She is my wife in the eyes of the law and the eyes of the clan. Which makes her your superior, Hamish. You will show her the respect her station demands." Hamish let out a harsh, jagged laugh. "Respect? For a girl who used to wash my laundry? Uncle, you've lost your mind. The council will never allow this. A human with no pedigree? You're making us a laughingstock among the other great packs." "The council does as I command," Lachlan growled. The sound was so deep it seemed to shake the floorboards. "And if you ever refer to my wife as a scavenger again, I will remind you exactly how I became the alpha of this territory." Hamish flinched. The bravado dropped for a split second, replaced by a raw, primal fear. He looked between Lachlan and Islay, his eyes darting like a trapped animal's. "You think you've won?" Hamish whispered, turning his venom back to Islay. "You think you're safe here? My mother is already calling for a blood audit. By the time she's done, they'll find out exactly what you are, a nothing. A blank space in the ledger." "I am the woman who owns your inheritance, Hamish," Islay said. She felt the power of the house behind her. "Every flat you live in, every car you drive, every pound in your account belongs to the MacAlister estate. And as of tonight, I am the one holding the keys." Hamish's face went from red to a ghostly, sickly white. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He had spent years treating Islay like a disposable toy, never imagining she would become the person who controlled his lifeblood. "You'll regret this," Hamish hissed. He backed toward the door, his eyes glowing with a faint, disturbing amber light that mirrored Lachlan's. "Both of you. This isn't a marriage. It's a declaration of war. And my mother has never lost a war." He turned and vanished into the night, the tires of his car screaming as he fled the estate. The silence that followed was heavy. Islay let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Her hand was shaking. "He's right about one thing," Lachlan said. He wasn't looking at the door. He was looking at Islay. "My sister, Mary, is coming. And she makes Hamish look like a house pet." "What is a blood audit?" Islay asked. Lachlan reached out and tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His fingers were searingly hot against her skin. "It is a test of your lineage, Islay. They will look for a reason to declare you unworthy. They will look for a reason to spill your blood. Then let them look," Islay said, though her heart was hammering. "I've been an orphan my whole life. I've survived worse than a family audit." "We shall see," Lachlan said. He turned back toward the stairs. "Greer, secure the perimeter, and send word to the elders. The wedding is moved to tomorrow at dawn. The Highlands do not forgive weakness, Islay, and neither does my sister." Lachlan stood by the window as the first light of dawn touched the heather. The atmosphere in the manor had shifted from cold to frozen. Islay sat at the long oak dining table, her fingers tracing the jagged edge of her new ring. She hadn't slept. The weight of the upcoming blood audit felt like a physical pressure on her chest. The sound of a helicopter blade cutting through the mist signaled the arrival. Moments later, the heavy doors of the dining hall swung open. A woman walked in who looked like a sharper, deadlier version of Lachlan. Her hair was a shock of silver, pulled back into a tight, severe bun. She wore a tailored gray suit that looked like armor. This was Lady Mary, Hamish's mother. Behind her, Hamish followed like a scolded dog, his eyes red with fury and a lack of sleep. Mary didn't look at her brother. She walked straight to the head of the table and stared at Islay. Her eyes were not amber. They were a piercing, icy blue that seemed to strip away Islay's skin. "So," Mary said. Her voice was like silk stretched over a blade. "This is the little stray that has turned my brother's head. Tell me, girl, do you even know the history of the seat you were trying to steal?" "I'm not stealing anything," Islay said. She stood up, refusing to be looked down upon. "Lachlan made an offer. I accepted. That makes me his partner, not a thief." Mary let out a dry, mirthless laugh. She turned to Lachlan. "A partner? You've brought a human into the inner sanctum, Lachlan. You've handed the keys to our bloodline to a girl who doesn't even have a surname worth recording. The council is already in the drawing room. They are demanding the trial of Silver." Lachlan's jaw tightened. "The trial is for suspected spies, Mary, not for my bride." "According to the ancient laws," Mary countered, leaning over the table, "any outsider entering the Alpha's bond must prove they do not carry the blight of the hunters. If she is pure human, the Silver will merely sting. If she is hiding something, it will burn her to the bone." Islay looked at Lachlan. His expression was a mask of stone, but she saw a flicker of genuine concern in his eyes. "What is the trial?" Islay asked. "A test of truth," Lachlan said. He walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. His grip was protective, but firm. "They will ask you to hold a relic of pure, blessed silver. To us, it is a poison. To humans, it is just metal. But Mary is hoping you are something else entirely." "I have nothing to hide," Islay said. "Let's get it over with." They were led into the great hall. 12 elders sat in a semicircle, dressed in heavy wool robes. In the center of the room stood a stone pedestal. Resting on a velvet cushion was a heavy silver dagger, its blade etched with runes that seemed to hum with a faint, white light. Islay Vance, the eldest man, spoke. His voice was like grinding gravel. "Step forward. Take the blade. If your heart is true and your blood is clean, you shall rise as a MacAlister. If you are a lie, the Silver will judge you." Hamish stepped forward, a cruel smirk crossing his face. "Go on, Islay. Show them how common you really are." Islay walked to the pedestal. The air around the dagger felt cold, unnaturally cold. She reached out her hand. Her pulse throbbed in her fingertips. She thought of the orphanage, the cold nights, the way Hamish had laughed at her. She thought of the power Lachlan had promised. She wrapped her fingers around the hilt of the silver dagger. For a second, there was nothing. Then, a searing, white-hot heat exploded from the palm of her hand. It wasn't the burn of a metal. It was an electric shock that surged through her entire body. The runes on the blade began to glow a brilliant, blinding violet. A gasp went up from the elders. Mary recoiled, her eyes widening in genuine shock. The light didn't fade. It grew stronger, reflecting in Islay's eyes until they glowed with the same violet hue. The stone pedestal beneath the dagger cracked. "She's not human," Hamish screamed, backing away. "Look at her. I told you she was a freak." Lachlan was at her side in an instant. He didn't pull her away. He wrapped his hand over hers on the hilt. The silver smoked against his skin, hissing as it burned him, but he didn't let go. He stared at the violet light, his expression shifting from shock to a grim, terrifying realization. "She isn't a hunter," Lachlan roared, his voice echoing like thunder. "And she isn't a commoner." He looked at his sister, his eyes flashing a dominant, predatory amber. "She is a lunar seer, a bloodline we thought was extinct for 3 centuries. Mary's face went pale. A lunar seer was the only being capable of stripping an alpha of his power. Islay wasn't just his wife. She was the only person in the world who could destroy him. "The trial is over," Lachlan commanded. He forced the dagger back onto the cushion. His palm was charred black, but he didn't flinch. He turned to Islay, who was gasping for air, the violet light fading from her vision. He gripped her chin, forcing her to look at him. "You lied to me," Lachlan whispered, his voice vibrating with a dangerous new energy. "You told me you were a nobody." "I didn't know," Islay choked out. "I swear I didn't know." Lachlan leaned in close to her ear. "It doesn't matter now. You aren't just my shield anymore, Islay. You are the most valuable prize in the Highlands. And I am never letting you go. Lock the doors. If anyone tries to leave this hall, they do so without their head." Lachlan's voice was a whip crack that broke the stunned silence of the great hall. His burned palm was already knitting back together with supernatural speed, but the smoke still curled from his skin. He didn't look at the elders. He didn't look at his sister. He looked only at Islay, his eyes burning with a terrifying hunger. Islay stumbled back, her hands still tingling with the residue of the violet light. What did you call me? A seer? A myth? Mary spat, her composure finally breaking. She looked at Islay with raw, unfiltered terror. A lunar seer is a parasite. She doesn't have power of her own. She leeches it from the Alpha. She is a danger to the entire bloodline. She is the one who will solidify my rule, Lachlan countered. He stepped toward Islay, but she backed away until she hit the cold stone of the pedestal. Stay back, Islay warned. She felt a strange, humming vibration in her blood. The air around her seemed to ripple. I didn't sign up for this. I wanted revenge on Hamish, not to be your magical battery. Lachlan stopped, a dark smirk tugging at his lips. You wanted power, Islay. Now you have it. But in this world, power is a target. The elders began to whisper, their voices a low drone of dissent. The pack was splitting in real time. Half looked at Islay with awe. The other half looked at her as if she were a plague. Hamish, seeing his mother's fear, found a new kind of desperation. He didn't look at Islay with lust or mockery anymore. He looked at her like a winning lottery ticket that had been stolen from him. If she's a seer, Hamish said, his voice shaky but loud, then she's too dangerous to be held by one man. The council should take her. She should be neutral territory. Touch her, Lachlan growled, his shadow lengthening across the floor until it looked like a monstrous wolf. And I will tear your heart out through your throat. Lachlan turned to Greer. Take her to the North Tower. Double the guard. No one enters, not even my sister. Islay was led away, her mind a whirlwind of confusion. She was no longer just a gold digger or an orphan. She was a seer. But as the heavy iron bolt slid into place on her door, she realized she was also a prisoner. She stood at the narrow window, watching the moon rise over the jagged peaks. A soft scrape at the door made her spin around. It wasn't the guards. A panel in the wall, a hidden servant's passage, slid open. Hamish stepped out, holding a damp cloth and a syringe. His eyes were bloodshot and frantic. You're coming with me, Islay, Hamish whispered. My mother is right. You're a freak. But you're a freak that can make me the Alpha. If I can't have you as a trophy, I'll have you as my power source. Get out, Islay screamed, reaching for a heavy brass lamp on the side table. Hamish lunged. He was faster than any human, his beta strength pinning her against the bed before she could scream a second time. He pressed the cloth over her mouth. It smelled of heavy chemicals and silver dust. As the world began to go black, Islay felt that violet heat flared deep in her gut. But she was too weak to channel it. Uncle Lachlan won't find you, Hamish hissed in her ear. By the time he realizes you're gone, we'll be across the border, and I'll be the one you're bonded to. The last thing Islay saw before the darkness took her was the silver wolf crest on Hamish's ring. The man who had discarded her like trash was now stealing her like a gem. If there is a single scratch on her, I will burn this entire glen to ash. The roar echoed through the vents of the manor, vibrating into the secret passage where Islay lay slumped against the cold stone. Consciousness returned to her in jagged pieces. Her head throbbed from the chemicals Hamish had used. Her wrists were bound with heavy, cold iron, handcuffs plated in a dull metal that made her skin itch. Shut up, Uncle, Hamish hissed. He wasn't looking at Islay. He was staring at a heavy iron door at the end of the crawl space. You're too late. The bond is already shifting. I can feel it. Islay struggled to sit up, her breath hitching. You're insane, Hamish. You can't steal a bond. It's not a piece of jewelry. Hamish turned to her, his face twisted in a manic grin. He looked desperate, his expensive shirt torn and stained with soot. That's where you're wrong. A seer's bond goes to the Alpha, who claims her first. My uncle hasn't marked you yet. He was too busy playing the gentleman. He grabbed Islay by the arm, dragging her toward an exit that led to the old stables. The rain was screaming outside, a Highland storm that felt like the earth itself was angry. They burst into the muddy yard. Hamish's black sports car sat idling, but it wasn't alone. A wall of shadows stood between them and the gate. The shadows moved. Lachlan stepped into the light of the security lamps. He wasn't wearing a jacket. His shirt was gone, and his skin was covered in a rhythmic, pulsing glow of amber veins. He didn't look human. His fingernails had lengthened into obsidian points, and his teeth were a jagged line of white ivory. Let her go, Lachlan said. The words didn't come from his throat. They seemed to come from the ground beneath their feet. Stay back, Hamish yelled, pulling a silver-edged dagger from his belt and holding it to Islay's throat. One step, and I'll see if a seer can bleed out as fast as a human. Islay felt the cold edge of the blade against her skin. But she also felt something else. A connection. She looked at Lachlan, and for a second, she didn't see a monster. She saw a bridge. The violet heat in her chest flared again, but this time, she didn't fight it. She reached out with her mind, searching for that amber glow in Lachlan's chest. Help me, she thought. Lachlan's eyes snapped to hers. He roared, a sound that shattered the windows of the nearby stable. He moved faster than the eye could follow. He didn't run, he blurred. Hamish shrieked and tried to slice downward, but his arm froze in midair. A shock wave of violet energy exploded from Islay's neck, hitting Hamish like a physical hammer. He was thrown backward, his body slamming into the side of his car with a sickening crunch of metal. Islay fell to her knees in the mud. The iron cuffs on her wrists snapped like dry twigs as the violet light dissipated. Lachlan was there a second later. He scooped her up into his massive arms, his skin still hot enough to steam in the rain. He didn't look at his broken nephew. He tucked Islay's head against his chest. I have you, he whispered, his voice ragged. The world could end tonight, and I would still have you. Islay gripped his shoulders, her fingers digging into his muscle. He said the bond shifts. Lachlan's grip tightened, his amber eyes fading back to dark brown as he fought for control. The only place you are shifting, Islay, is into my shadow. From this moment on, you do not breathe without my permission. My sister and her spawn have declared war. Now, I show them how a MacAlister ends one. He turned and carried her back toward the manor. Behind them, the security team swarmed Hamish's unconscious body. Mary stood on the balcony, watching her son be dragged away. She didn't look sad. She looked at Islay with a cold, calculating hunger. The audit wasn't over. It had just become a hunt. You are not a guest anymore, Islay. You are the heart of this clan, and I will treat you accordingly. Lachlan's words echoed in the cold air of the North Tower. He hadn't put her back in her bedroom. He had brought her to the gilded vault, a suite of rooms deep within the stone heart of the manor, reinforced with ironwood and ancient wards. Islay watched from the velvet chaise as Lachlan paced the rug. He looked like a man possessed. His hands were still stained with the mud from the courtyard, and his eyes hadn't fully lost their amber glow. You're locking me away, Islay said. She tried to keep her voice from trembling. You're doing exactly what Hamish did, just with nicer furniture. Lachlan stopped. He turned to her, his shadow stretching long across the stone floor. Hamish wanted to use you as a battery. I am keeping you alive. My sister has already contacted the High Council. They are coming for a sanctity review. They believe a seer is too powerful to be controlled by a single alpha. I am not a thing to be controlled. Islay snapped. She stood up, the violet energy humming faintly under her skin. I am a nursing student from Edinburgh. I am an orphan. I am nobody. You are the daughter of the woman who nearly broke this clan 30 years ago, Lachlan growled. The room went silent. Islay felt the air leave her lungs. What did you just say? Lachlan sighed, the sound like a tired beast. He walked to a heavy iron wall safe and punched in a code. He pulled out a weathered, leather-bound journal and a single, grainy photograph. He handed them to Islay. In the photo, a woman with Islay's exact eyes and copper hair stood in front of the very gates of this manor. She was smiling, her hand resting on the shoulder of a man wearing a MacAlister crest. Her name was Elspeth, Lachlan said softly. She was the last known seer, and the man beside her was my father's brother. My uncle. They didn't just fall in love, Islay. They tried to end the Alpha system entirely. They wanted to share the power with the whole pack. Islay's fingers brushed the photo. What happened to them? The council happened, Lachlan said. His voice was cold as ice. They were declared traitors. My father was forced to choose between his brother and the laws of the pack. He chose the laws. They disappeared in the middle of a winter storm. We were told they died. But seeing you, knowing your age, it's clear they escaped long enough to leave a legacy. Islay felt a sudden, desperate need to know more. There must be more records. Where are the journals from that time? In the archives. Below this room, Lachlan said. He checked his watch. I have to meet the council envoys at the gate. Stay here. Greer is outside the door. If you try to leave, he has orders to restrain you. Gently, but firmly. Lachlan left, the heavy iron bolt clicking into place. But he had forgotten one thing. Islay knew how to find what she needed. She looked at the floorboards, searching for the same pattern she had seen in the servants' passage. She found it, a loose stone near the hearth. She climbed down a narrow spiral staircase into a room that smelled of dust and old secrets. It was the MacAlister archive. Rows of ledgers stretched into the darkness. She searched for the year of her birth. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She found a ledger marked contingency and liquidations. She flipped to the back. There, tucked between the pages, was a birth certificate. Name, Islay Vance. Mother, Elspeth Vance. Father, Alistair MacAlister. Below the names was a note in red ink. The child must never return. If found, the bloodline must be extinguished to prevent the collapse of the Alpha's will. You weren't supposed to find that yet. Islay spun around. Lady Mary stood in the shadows of the archive, a small silver vial in her hand. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked triumphant. My brother thinks he can use you to stay in power, Mary whispered, stepping into the light. But the council doesn't want a seer. They want a sacrifice. And I am happy to provide it if it means my son takes his rightful place. Mary raised the vial. Do you know what silver nitrate does to a seer's blood, Islay? It turns your gift into a cage. You won't be able to call for him. You won't be able to scream. Do not move, little bird. This will feel like ice in your veins, and then you will feel nothing at all. Mary's voice was as cold as the stone walls surrounding them. She uncorked the silver vial, and a faint, metallic mist curled into the air. Islay backed away, her heels clicking against the damp floor of the archive. Her mind raced. She was trapped between rows of ancient history and a woman who wanted her erased from it. You killed them, didn't you? Islay asked. She kept her voice steady, though her heart was thundering. My parents. You were part of the council that hunted them down. Mary's icy blue eyes flickered. I did what was necessary to protect the pack. My brother is a romantic fool. He thinks he can tame a seer. But I know that your blood is a wildfire. If it isn't extinguished, it burns the whole forest down. Mary lunged. She was unnaturally fast, moving with the grace of a wolf even in her human form. She reached for Islay's throat, the silver vial tilted and ready to pour the liquid down Islay's throat. Islay didn't think. She didn't call for Lachlan. For the first time in her life, she reached inward, toward that burning violet core that had saved her from Hamish. Get away from me, Islay roared. She didn't just shout the words. She felt them rip through her. A wave of violet energy didn't just explode outward this time. It manifested as a visible shockwave of light that warped the air. The impact hit Mary like a physical blow. The silver vial shattered in her hand, the liquid nitrate splashing harmlessly onto the stone floor. Mary was thrown back into a shelf of ledgers, the heavy wood groaning under the weight. Islay stood in the center of the room, her copper hair whipping around her face as if caught in a gale. Her veins weren't amber like Lachlan's. They glowed with a faint, pulsing purple light through the skin of her arms. Mary scrambled to her feet, her face a mask of disbelief and horror. It's impossible. You haven't been initiated. You shouldn't be able to channel without an alpha. I don't need an alpha to protect myself from you, Islay said. The power felt intoxicating. It felt like she was finally plugged into a socket after a lifetime of being empty. The heavy iron door at the top of the stairs blew off its hinges. Lachlan stormed down, his eyes pure amber, his claws fully extended. He saw Mary huddled against the shelves and Islay standing amidst the violet glow. He skidded to a halt, the sheer pressure of Islay's aura making even him hesitate. Islay, drop the barrier. You're draining the wards of the entire house. She tried to kill me, Lachlan, Islay said, her voice sounding layered, as if two people were speaking at once. She killed my mother. She signed the order. Lachlan looked at his sister. The growl that came from his chest was so low it vibrated the glass jars on the archive shelves. Mary, I told you she was mine. She is a monster, Lachlan. Mary screamed, pointing a shaking finger at Islay. Look at her. She's already stronger than you. She'll turn us all into her puppets. Lachlan walked through the violet pressure, his muscles tensing as he fought against the energy. He reached out, his hand trembling as he moved toward Islay's shoulder. Islay, look at me, Lachlan commanded. If you don't stop, you'll burn your heart out. You aren't ready for this much power. Islay looked at him, and for a second, The violet light in her eyes flickered. She saw the charred skin on his palm from the trial of silver, the wound he had taken for her. The light began to dim. The pressure in the room vanished. Islay collapsed forward. Lachlan caught her before she hit the floor, pulling her tight against his chest. Greer, Lachlan roared toward the stairs. Take my sister to the black cells. She stays there until the council arrives. If she speaks, gag her. You can't do this. Mary shrieked as guards emerged from the shadows to seize her. I am a MacAlister. You are a traitor to the Luna, Lachlan said, his voice cold and final. He looked down at Islay, who was gasping for air in his arms. He brushed a lock of hair from her forehead. His touch was no longer just possessive, it was reverent. You found the birth certificate, didn't you? Lachlan whispered. I'm a MacAlister, Islay choked out. I'm not an outsider. I'm your cousin. Lachlan's grip tightened. That makes you the rightful alpha, Islay. Which means my sister was right about one thing. This marriage isn't just a deal anymore. It's the only thing keeping this pack from a civil war. The High Council does not recognize blood until it is spilled on the stone of truth, Lachlan. The Great Hall of MacAlister Manor was no longer a home. It had been transformed into a courtroom. 3 ancient figures sat upon high-backed chairs of bone and iron. They were the elders of the High Council, vampiric in their stillness, their eyes clouded with the milky film of centuries. Islay stood at the center of the room. She felt the weight of the birth certificate tucked into the waistband of her trousers. Beside her, Lachlan stood like a statue of granite, his hand hovering near the small of her back. He wasn't touching her, but his heat was a constant, grounding presence. We have heard the reports. The central elder, a woman named Morag, rasped. Her voice sounded like dry leaves skittering over a grave. A human girl claiming the Seer's light. A MacAlister alpha claiming a marriage of convenience. And a sister of the blood held in the black cells. My sister is a murderer, Lachlan said, his voice echoing with authority. She attempted to assassinate the future Luna of this pack. She attempted to prune a weed. A voice drawled from the shadows. Hamish Boyd stepped forward. He was pale, his arm in a sling from his encounter with the car, but he looked smug. He held a scroll sealed with a black wax stamp. The council has my mother's testimony. Islay Vance is a genetic thief. She isn't a seer by birth. She's a parasite who drained the power from the manor's wards. Islay felt the violet hum in her blood flare up. She looked at Hamish, the boy who had called her a commoner and a leech. You want the truth, Hamish? Islay asked. Her voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the hall. Then let's use the stone. A murmur rippled through the gathered witnesses. The stone of truth was a slab of obsidian at the foot of the elders. It reacted to the MacAlister bloodline. If a true heir touched it, the stone would glow gold. If an impostor touched it, the obsidian would shatter, taking the impostor's hand with it. Islay, no, Lachlan whispered, his hand finally gripping her arm. You don't have to do this. We can fight them. I'm done fighting your family, Lachlan, Islay said, looking him in the eye. It's time I lead them. Islay walked toward the obsidian slab. The air in the room grew cold. She could feel Mary watching from the shadows of the gallery, guarded by 2 sentries. She could feel Hamish's greedy eyes. She placed her palm flat against the cold, black surface. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. Hamish began to laugh. See? The stone knows she's nothing. Guards, take her. The laughter died in his throat. A single drop of Islay's blood fell from a small cut on her thumb onto the obsidian. The stone didn't just glow gold. It erupted in a pillar of violet and gold flame that hit the ceiling. The ancient bone chairs of the elders rattled. The floorboards of the manor groaned as the house itself recognized its true master. The line of Alistair, Morag whispered, standing up with trembling limbs. The lost heir has returned. The elders descended from their dais. They didn't go to Lachlan. They knelt before Islay. The alpha seat is divided, Morag announced. By blood, Islay Vance is the primary heir. By strength and current bond, Lachlan MacAlister holds the sword. You are no longer husband and wife by contract. You are a dual monarchy. Lachlan's expression was unreadable. He looked at Islay, not as a protector, but as an equal, and perhaps, for the first time, as a threat. And what of the traitors? Islay asked. She pointed a finger at Hamish and then up at Mary. The law of the Seer is absolute, Morag replied. Their fate is in your hands, Luna. Islay looked at Hamish. He fell to his knees, the arrogance completely drained from his face. Islay, please. We were together. I was confused. You weren't confused, Hamish, Islay said, her voice cold and clear. You were cruel. And cruelty has a high interest rate. She turned to the guards. Strip him of the MacAlister name. Cast him out of the Highlands. If he is seen on our lands after sunset, he is prey for any wolf who finds him. And my sister? Lachlan asked, his voice low. Islay looked up at Mary, the woman who had killed her mother. She stays in the cells. I want her to watch as the stray she tried to kill builds the future she tried to destroy. Lachlan walked over to Islay, standing so close she could feel his heart beating. He leaned down, his lips brushing her ear. You have the crown now, Islay, he whispered. But do you have the stomach to keep it when the other clans come to take it from you? The crown is heavy, Islay. It tends to crush those who wear it for pride instead of survival. Lachlan stood on the battlements of the manor, his coat billowing in the frigid Highland wind. Below them, a fleet of silver vehicles wound up the mountain pass. These weren't MacAlister cars. They bore the crest of a frozen sun, the clan Vane from the northern territories of Scandinavia. Islay adjusted the heavy velvet cloak around her shoulders. The violet ring on her finger felt cold, a constant reminder of the power now humming in her marrow. I didn't choose the crown, Lachlan. It chose me, and I'm not wearing it for pride. Then wear it for the war that just pulled into our driveway, Lachlan said, pointing toward the lead car. A tall, pale man stepped out of the vehicle. He moved with a grace that was almost liquid, his hair as white as the surrounding snow. This was Islay Vance, the High Alpha of the North. Behind him stood a woman veiled in black silk, her presence radiating a chilling aura that made the local wolves whimper and tuck their tails. The grand doors of the hall swung open once more. Islay sat in the primary throne, with Lachlan seated to her right. The power dynamic had shifted, and the air in the room was thick with tension. Islay Vance walked to the center of the hall. He didn't bow. He looked at Islay with a hunger that was far more dangerous than Hamish's greed. So, the rumors are true, Eric said, his voice like cracking ice. A seer has risen from the ashes of the MacAlister line. Tell me, girl, does your Alpha tell you the truth of why the Scandinavian packs have arrived? Or is he still hiding the debt he owes my house? Islay glanced at Lachlan. His jaw was set so tight the muscles in his neck stood out like iron cables. The debt was settled 10 years ago, Eric. My father paid it in gold. Gold is for humans. Eric laughed, the sound hollow and sharp. He turned back to Islay. 10 years ago, your husband made a pact to save his own life during the Great Purge. He promised a seer to the north. He didn't have one then, so he signed a blood bond for the first one to be born or found. Islay felt the violet light in her chest flicker and then turn cold. She turned to Lachlan, her voice a low, dangerous whisper. Is this true? Did you find me because of a contract, or because you needed a wife? Lachlan didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on Eric. I found you to protect you, Islay. He found you because he owed my sister a life, Eric countered. He gestured to the veiled woman. She stepped forward and lifted the black silk. The woman was beautiful, but her skin was translucent, showing the faint shimmer of silver veins. She was a hollowed seer, a woman whose power had been drained until she was nothing but a shell. This is what happens when a seer is used to pay a debt, Islay, the woman whispered. Her voice sounded like 1,000 dying breaths. Lachlan promised you to us. He took the MacAlister throne using my blood as a down payment. Now he must deliver the full price. Islay stood up. The violet energy didn't explode this time. It coiled around her arms like twin serpents. The room began to shake. I am not a prize, Islay said. She looked at Lachlan, and the betrayal hurt worse than anything Hamish had ever done. Hamish had been a liar, but Lachlan had been her hope. And I am not a currency. The bond is signed in blood, Luna, Eric said, stepping closer. If you do not come to the north, the MacAlister lands will be stripped. Every wolf, every child, every stone will be razed to the ground. That was the price Lachlan agreed to. Lachlan stood up, his claws extending. The contract is void. She is the Alpha. An Alpha cannot be traded. The contract doesn't care about your titles, Eric sneered. It cares about the blood. And the blood says she belongs to the winter. Islay looked between the man she had started to trust and the monster who had come to collect her. She realized the dual monarchy wasn't a victory. It was a target. Lachlan, Islay said, her voice dripping with venom. Did you know who I was when you found me in that office? Did you know I was the daughter of Alistair? Lachlan finally looked at her. His amber eyes were filled with a dark, tragic honesty. I knew you were the only way to save my people from the debt. I didn't know I would fall in love with the debt itself. I never thought I would see the day a MacAlister Alpha begged at the feet of a prisoner. Mary's voice echoed through the damp, salt-stained walls of the black cells. She sat on a stone bench, her silver hair loose and messy, yet she still held herself with the arrogance of a queen. Islay stood on the other side of the heavy iron bars, the violet glow of her ring the only light in the suffocating darkness. The scent of damp earth and old blood hung heavy in the air. I'm not begging, Mary, Islay said, her voice steady. And I'm not here as an alpha. I'm here as the daughter of the woman you murdered. I want to know about the North. Mary let out a dry, rasping cackle. She stood up and walked toward the bars, her blue eyes gleaming with a manic spark. So, Eric Vane has arrived to collect his pound of flesh. I told Lachlan that debt would be the end of us. He thought he was so clever, using a seer's ghost to buy his way onto the throne. Islay gripped the bars. The iron felt cold, but the heat in her blood was rising. He said he found me to protect me. But Eric says I was the payment for a blood bond signed 10 years ago. Who is telling the truth? Both, Mary whispered, leaning close enough that Islay could smell the stale air on her breath. Lachlan found you because the Vane Pack was closing in. He needed to secure the asset before they did. But he didn't expect you to have Alistair's eyes. He didn't expect to see his own blood looking back at him. He fell for the very thing he was supposed to sell. Islay felt a sick twist in her stomach. Every touch from Lachlan, every protective growl, now felt tainted by the shadow of a transaction. How do I break the bond? Eric says if I don't go, he'll raise the Highlands. Mary's smile widened, revealing teeth that looked sharpened. There is only one way to break a Vane contract. It requires a sacrifice that my brother is too weak to make. It requires the heart of the one who signed it. If Lachlan dies, the contract dies with him. The air in the cell grew frigid. Islay stepped back, her heart hammering against her ribs. Mary was suggesting she kill her own husband, the man who had, despite his lies, stood between her and a silver blade. There must be another way, Islay said. There is, Mary said, her voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial hiss. Eric doesn't just want to see her. He wants the MacAlister territory. He wants a bridge into the south. If you go with him, you aren't just a bride. You are the key that unlocks our borders. You will watch as he turns our people into cattle. A heavy footstep sounded on the stone stairs. Lachlan emerged from the shadows, his face a mask of grief and fury. He looked at Islay, then at his sister. Get away from her, Mary, Lachlan commanded. She's asking the right questions, brother, Mary taunted. She wants to know if she's a wife or a trade-in. Tell her about the mark on your chest. Tell her what happens when the moon reaches its peak tonight. Islay turned to Lachlan. She walked toward him and ripped the collar of his shirt aside. There, over his heart, was a blackened brand in the shape of a frozen sun. It was pulsing with a sickly gray light. It's a tether, Islay whispered, her eyes filling with tears of rage. If I don't go with him by midnight, this mark kills you. Lachlan grabbed her wrists, his grip desperate. It doesn't matter, Islay. I would rather die 1,000 times than hand you over to Eric Vane. I knew the price when I signed it, and I'll pay it. No, Islay said, her violet aura flaring with a new, icy resolve. She looked past him at Mary, then back to the man who had lied to save his soul. I'm not letting you die, and I'm not going to the north. I'm a MacAlister. We don't pay debts. We settle them. She turned back to Mary. You want out of this cell? Tell me where the Vane Heartstone is hidden. Eric wouldn't travel this far without the source of his power. Mary hesitated, her eyes darting between the two of them. It's in the lead carriage, guarded by the hollowed Seer. But you can't touch it, Islay. It's pure silver frost. It will turn your blood to ice. I've spent my whole life in the cold, Islay said, her voice sounding like a mountain storm. I think I'm ready for a little frost. Islay, stay here, Lachlan roared as she pushed past him. That's a suicide mission. Islay didn't stop. She reached the top of the stairs and looked back at him, her eyes glowing a brilliant, terrifying purple. You should have trusted me with the truth, Lachlan. Now, You'll have to trust me with your life. The blood of a seer is a map, Islay. If you follow it tonight, it will lead you to a grave. Greer's warning whispered through her mind as Islay moved through the shadows of the stables. The Highland rain had turned to sleet, lashing against the stone walls like 1,000 tiny needles. In the center of the courtyard, the silver carriages of Clan Vane sat like dormant predators. A faint, ethereal blue light pulsed from the vents of the lead coach, illuminating the swirling mist with a ghostly glow. Islay reached the edge of the perimeter. Her fingers throbbed where her ring met her skin. The violet energy was restless, sensing the unnatural cold radiating from the Scandinavian vehicles. She looked back at the manor. She could see Lachlan on the balcony, held back by his own guards. He was screaming her name, but the wind swallowed the sound. He was too weak to follow. The mark of the frozen sun was draining the life from his limbs with every passing minute. She turned her gaze back to the carriage. Standing before the door was the hollowed Seer. The woman's eyes were white, devoid of pupils, and her skin looked like cracked porcelain. She didn't move, but the air around her shivered. "You cannot take what has already been paid for," the woman whispered, her voice sounding like ice grinding against bone. "I'm not taking it," Islay said, stepping into the light. The violet light in her eyes flared, cutting through the blue mist. "I'm destroying it." The hollowed Seer raised her hands. A wave of frost fire erupted from her palms, turning the rain into jagged shards of ice that tore through the air. Islay didn't flinch. She threw her hands forward, manifesting a dome of violet energy. The ice shattered against her shield, humming with a frequency that made Islay's teeth ache. Islay pushed forward, her boots slipping in the frozen mud. She could feel the woman's pain, the hollow, empty ache of a power that had been harvested for centuries. She didn't want to fight this woman. She wanted to free her. "Break the connection," Islay shouted over the roar of the wind. "He's using you as a conduit. If the stone breaks, you can go home." "I have no home," the woman cried, and the frost fire grew more intense. Islay realized she couldn't win a battle of endurance. She dropped her shield for a split second, allowing the cold to bite into her skin. She lunged forward, her hand glowing with a concentrated point of purple light. She didn't strike the woman. She struck the earth at the woman's feet, sending a pulse of seer energy into the ground. The carriage rocked. The blue light within intensified until it was blinding. Islay ignored the searing cold and ripped open the carriage door. Resting on a pedestal of solid silver was the Heartstone. It was a jagged shard of translucent crystal, pulsing with a rhythmic, freezing heartbeat. It was the source of the Vane Pack's immortality and the anchor of Lachlan's debt. "Stop!" Eric Vane's voice thundered across the courtyard. He was sprinting toward the carriage, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. He wasn't the calm, liquid predator anymore. He was a man watching his empire crumble. Islay reached for the stone. Her fingers were inches away when the cold began to numb her mind. Her vision blurred. Her heart rate slowed to a crawl. This silver frost Mary had warned her about was trying to turn her blood into ice. "Lachlan!" Islay gasped, her voice barely a whisper. Far away, in the manor, Lachlan felt the call. The bond between them, the one he had bought with a lie but forged with a kiss, snapped taut. He found a final, desperate reserve of strength. He didn't run to her. He channeled his alpha will through the bond, sending a surge of amber warmth into Islay's chest. The violet and amber collided. The internal heat shattered the ice in Islay's veins. With a roar of defiance, she grabbed the Heartstone. The crystal shrieked. It wasn't a sound, but a psychic vibration that knocked every wolf in the courtyard to their knees. Islay squeezed the stone. She didn't use her strength. She used her seer light, flooding the crystal with the warmth of the Highland sun. The Heartstone shattered into a million dull, gray pebbles. The blue mist vanished. The hollowed Seer collapsed, her white eyes finally finding color as the tether broke. In the manor, the mark on Lachlan's chest faded into nothingness. Eric Vane skidded to a halt, his hands trembling. He looked at the empty pedestal, then at Islay, who stood in the rain, gasping for air, her hands glowing with the fading remnants of the violet light. "You have no idea what you've done," Eric whispered, his voice shaking with rage. "That stone was the balance. You haven't just freed the MacAlisters. You've invited the shadows of the old world back into the light." Islay stood tall, her gaze steady. Then let them come. I'm tired of people fighting over my blood. Eric looked at his fallen seer, then at the manor where the MacAlister wolves were beginning to howl in victory. He knew he had lost this battle. He backed toward the shadows. The contract is broken, Islay, but the war is just beginning. Every pack in the north now knows what you are, and they don't want a bride anymore. They want a trophy. He vanished into the mist, leaving the silver fleet behind. Islay felt the adrenaline drain from her body. She turned toward the manor. Lachlan was there, running down the steps. He caught her before she could hit the mud, pulling her into a crushing embrace. You're alive, he choked out, burying his face in her hair. You insane, beautiful woman. You're alive. Islay pulled back just enough to look at him. Her eyes were still faintly purple. The debt is paid, Lachlan. But don't ever lie to me again. Lachlan nodded, his eyes filled with a new kind of respect. Never. From now on, we rule together. No secrets. No contracts. As they walked back into the manor, Islay looked at the horizon. The storm was clearing, but the air felt different. Eric was right about one thing. The world now knew a seer had returned, and the peace she had fought for was only the eye of the storm. The gates are breached, Islay. Not by a wolf, but by someone who claims to know your name. Greer's voice crackled through the intercom of the gilded vault. Islay was sitting by the fire, her hands still wrapped in thick bandages from the frostburn she'd sustained destroying the Heartstone. Lachlan sat opposite her, his eyes rarely leaving her face. The tension between them had softened into something deeper, but the peace was fragile. I gave no orders to open the gates, Lachlan growled, reaching for his jacket. She didn't use force, Master, Greer replied. She used a photograph of the mistress at university. She's human, sir, and she's terrified. Islay stood up, her heart skipping a beat. Poppy. They descended to the grand foyer. Standing amidst the stone pillars and silver armor was a girl who looked entirely out of place. Poppy was wearing a drenched yellow raincoat, her hair matted to her forehead, clutching a tablet as if it were a shield. She looked at the towering height of Lachlan and the predatory stillness of the guards, and she began to shake. Islay, Poppy whispered, her voice cracking. Is that really you? The news? Everyone back in Edinburgh says you've been kidnapped by a cult. They say you're in danger. Islay hurried forward, ignoring the warning growl from the sentries. She took Poppy's cold hands in hers. I'm safe, Poppy. I promise. But why are you here? How did you find this place? Poppy looked at Lachlan, her eyes wide with a fear that wasn't just about the rain. I didn't find it. A man came to my flat. He didn't have a face, Islay. Not a real one. It was like his features were made of smoke. He told me that if I didn't deliver a message to you, the whole city would burn. Lachlan stepped forward, his presence darkening the room. What message? Poppy fumbled with her tablet, pulling up a video file. He told me to show you this. He called it the memory of the first seer. The screen flickered to life. It wasn't a modern video. It was an ancient, grainy recording, or perhaps a psychic projection captured by technology. It showed a woman who looked exactly like Islay, but her eyes weren't purple. They were a terrifying, void-like black. She stood in front of a tree made of silver wood, and beneath her feet, the ground was littered with the bones of wolves. The shadows of the old world do not forgive the breaking of the balance. The woman in the video spoke. Her voice sounded like a chorus of crows. The Heartstone was a lock. By shattering it, the seer has opened the door for the unbound. We are coming for our blood, Islay Vance. And we will start with the one who loves you most. The tablet screen shattered in Poppy's hands. She shrieked, dropping the device as black smoke curled from the cracks in the glass. Lachlan caught Islay as she stumbled back. His amber eyes were scanning the shadows of the foyer, his nostrils flaring. The unbound. The ancient spirits of the first packs. They were trapped inside the Vane's Heartstone for 1,000 years. I didn't just free the North, Islay whispered, the horror dawning on her. I freed the executioners. You did what you had to do to save me, Lachlan said, his voice hard. He turned to Greer. Seal the manor. Prepare the silver glass wards. And get this human girl to the guest quarters. She is under my protection. Poppy grabbed Islay's sleeve. Islay, there's more. The man. The smoke man. He said he's already inside. He said the shadow is already in the house. A sudden, sharp scream echoed from the kitchen wing. It wasn't a wolf's howl. It was a sound of pure, soul-shattering agony. Islay and Lachlan ran toward the sound. They burst into the servants' hall to find the head chef slumped against the wall. His eyes were wide and milky white, and his skin was covered in a frost that looked like black lace. "It's starting," Lachlan hissed, his claws sliding out. The lights in the hallway flickered and died. In the darkness, the violet light from Islay's ring began to pulse, but it wasn't steady. It was flickering, as if something were trying to eat the light itself. "Islay, stay behind me," Lachlan commanded. A low, guttural laugh came from the corner of the ceiling. A mass of shadow, darker than the night, began to pour out of the vents. It didn't have a body, but it had claws made of solidified smoke. "The debt is not paid, Alpha," the shadow hissed. "The debt is only transferred. One life for the many. Give us the Seer, and the pack lives. Refuse, and we will turn your manor into a tomb. Do not let go of my hand, Islay. If you slip away in there, I cannot bring you back." Lachlan's voice was the only thing anchoring her to the physical world. They were in the center of the great hall, surrounded by a circle of burning sage and silver dust. Poppy stood near the hearth, guarded by 3 of the elite sentries, her eyes wide with a terror that no human was ever meant to feel. The shadow entity had retreated into the walls of the manor, a silent poison waiting to strike again. "I have to do this, Lachlan," Islay said. She felt the violet energy in her veins throbbing in time with the darkness lurking in the shadows. "It's inside the house's foundation. It's feeding on the pack's fear. If I don't go into the dream walk and pull it out, we're all dead by morning." Lachlan sat cross-legged opposite her, their knees touching. He took her bandaged hands in his. His touch was like fire, a grounding heat against the unnatural chill of the room. "The dream walk is the realm of the unbound. It is a place of memory and nightmare. It will show you things to break your spirit. My spirit has been tempered in the gutter, Lachlan. It won't break so easily." Islay closed her eyes. She focused on the violet light behind her eyelids. She let it expand, flowing out of her chest and into Lachlan, creating a bridge of light between them. The world around her began to dissolve. The sounds of the sleet and the crackling fire faded, replaced by a deafening, echoing silence. When she opened her eyes, she was no longer in the manor. She was standing in a forest of silver trees, their branches twisted like reaching fingers. The sky was a bruised purple, and the ground beneath her feet was a carpet of black ash. "Lachlan," she called out. "I am here." His voice echoed in her mind, sounding miles away. "I am your anchor. Follow the scent of the shadow." Islay moved through the silver woods. The air tasted of iron and ancient dust. She saw flashes of memories that weren't hers, the first Seer being chained to the heartstone, the cries of 1,000 wolves being sacrificed to keep the balance. The unbound weren't just monsters. They were the vengeful ghosts of a system that had used Seers as tools for centuries. Suddenly, the silver trees shifted. She wasn't in the forest anymore. She was in a hospital room, the room where her mother had died. "Islay, why did you leave me?" a voice whispered. Islay froze. Sitting in the chair by the bed was Elspeth. Her mother looked exactly as she did in the old photographs, but her eyes were leaking black smoke. "It's not real," Islay hissed, her fingers curling into fists. "You're a memory. A trick. Is it a trick that you were an orphan while your blood lived in luxury?" her mother's ghost asked, standing up. Every step she took left a footprint of black frost. "Is it a trick that the MacAlisters let us starve so they could keep their throne? Lachlan's father ordered our execution, Islay. And now you love the son of the man who killed me." The violet light around Islay began to flicker. The doubt was like a cold weight in her stomach. "Islay, listen to my voice." Lachlan's psychic shout cracked through the vision. "The shadow is feeding. It is right in front of you." Islay looked past the ghost of her mother. Behind the image, a massive, faceless shape of smoke was coiled like a serpent, its claws hooked into the memory of the hospital room. It was using her grief as a gateway. "You want my blood?" Islay roared, her eyes erupting into a brilliant, solid violet. "Then take all of it." She didn't try to pull away. She lunged forward, grabbing the smoky mass with her bare hands. The dreamwalk screamed. The violet energy surged through her arms, acting as a conduit. She wasn't just fighting the shadow. She was flooding it with the reality of the present, the heat of the manor, the strength of the bond, and the fury of a woman who was done being a victim. The hospital room shattered like glass. The silver trees turned to ash. Islay felt a violent tug on her soul. She was being pulled back. She gasped, her eyes snapping open in the great hall. She slammed back into her body, so hard she gasped for air. Lachlan caught her, his own face pale and sweating. On the floor in front of them, the shadow entity had been forced into a physical form. A small, shriveled creature that looked like a bird made of charred bone. It let out a final, pathetic hiss and crumbled into dust. The lights in the manor hummed back to life. The oppressive chill vanished. "Is it over?" Poppy whispered from the hearth. Islay looked at her hands. The bandages had burned away, leaving her skin glowing with a faint, permanent violet tint. She looked at Lachlan, and for a moment, the image of her mother's ghost lingered in her mind. "The shadow in the house is gone," Islay said, her voice sounding older, heavier. "But the shadow in our history isn't. Lachlan, we need to talk about what your father did. Because the Unbound didn't just come for me. They came for justice." Lachlan's expression darkened. He knew the dream walk had revealed the truth. "The past is a graveyard, Islay. If we keep digging, we might not like what we find." "We're already digging," Islay said, standing up and looking toward the windows. The sun was beginning to rise, but the Highland peaks looked like jagged teeth against the sky. "And I think we just hit the coffin. A locked door is only a suggestion when the person on the other side has nothing left to lose." Islay stood before the iron-reinforced entrance of the secret vaults, located 3 levels beneath the manor's foundation. The violet glow of her skin had faded to a simmer, but her temper was at a boiling point. Behind her, Lachlan looked like a man walking toward his own execution. He held the master key, a heavy piece of obsidian that pulsed in rhythm with the house. "My father swore these records were sealed for a reason," Islay. Lachlan warned, his voice low and raspy. "Some truths are like silver nitrate. They don't just hurt, they dissolve everything they touch." "My mother was dissolved by your father's lies," Islay countered, her voice hard. "Open the door, Lachlan, or I'll let the seer light do it for me." With a heavy sigh, Lachlan pressed the obsidian key into the slot. The gears within the wall groaned, a sound of ancient metal protesting the intrusion. The door slid open, revealing a room filled not with gold, but with cylinders of parchment and jars of preserved essences. As they stepped inside, a chime sounded on Lachlan's wrist comm. It was Greer, and his voice was tight with uncharacteristic panic. "Master, the perimeter at the South Bridge has been breached. The transport carrying the prisoner Hamish Boyd was found in the ravine." Lachlan froze. "And Hamish?" "The guards are dead, sir. Their throats weren't cut by blades. They were frozen solid from the inside out. Hamish is gone." Islay felt the air turn cold. "The Unbound. He didn't escape. They took him. Or he invited them in." Lachlan hissed, his amber eyes flashing with a predatory light. "Hamish always was a bottom feeder. He would trade his soul for a crumb of the power you have." Islay turned away from the door, her eyes scanning the rows of scrolls until she found one marked with her mother's maiden name. She ripped it open, her eyes darting across the faded ink. It wasn't a ledger. It was a diary. "He didn't just exile them," Islay whispered, her voice trembling as she read. "Your father didn't just cast my parents out. He used a seer binding spell to strip my mother of her voice so she could never tell the pack that he had stolen the Alpha right from Alistair. My father was the true Alpha, Lachlan. Your father was a usurper." Lachlan backed away, his face pale. That can't be right. The Stone of Truth would have known." "He used the Heartstone," Islay said, pointing to a diagram in the scroll. "He used the Scandinavian artifact to mask the bloodline. My parents weren't traitors. They were victims of a coup." Before Lachlan could respond, a shadow flickered at the edge of the vault. It wasn't the smoky mass from the dream walk. It was a man, thin and ragged, wearing a suit that was shredded at the sleeves. Hamish Boyd stepped into the light, but he wasn't the boy Islay had known. His skin was the color of a bruise, and his eyes were leaking the same black smoke as the entities from the forest. He held a jagged shard of silver glass in his good hand. "Auntie Islay," Hamish rasped, his voice sounding like 2 stones grinding together. "The shadows told me you were down here digging up the past. They told me I could have my name back if I brought them your head." Lachlan shifted instantly, his body surging into a semi-transformation. "Hamish, stop. You're being piloted by ghosts. There's nothing left of you in there." There's enough, Hamish screamed, lunging forward with unnatural speed. He didn't go for Lachlan. He went for the scrolls. With a swipe of the silver glass, he slashed the ancient parchment, igniting a black flame that began to devour the records of the coup. If I can't be the heir, then no one will know I wasn't. Hamish shrieked. Islay didn't wait for Lachlan. She raised her hand, the violet energy erupting from her palm like a physical lash. The light struck Hamish in the chest, but he didn't fly back. He absorbed the energy, his smoky eyes glowing brighter. The unbound thank you for the meal, Islay. Hamish grinned, his teeth turning black. The more you fight, the stronger we get. He turned and vanished into the darkness of the lower tunnels, his laughter echoing through the vents. The fire he had started was spreading fast, eating the only proof of Islay's father's legitimacy. Lachlan grabbed Islay, pulling her toward the exit as the vault began to fill with toxic black smoke. We have to go. The mountain is unstable. The truth is burning, Lachlan. Islay cried, trying to reach for the scrolls. The truth is in your blood. Lachlan roared, hauling her out of the room just as the stone ceiling collapsed. They stood in the hallway, gasping for air, as the lower levels of the manor rumbled with the weight of the cave-in. Islay looked at the charred remains of the doorway. Her history was gone. Her proof was ash. And her greatest enemy was now a vessel for an ancient, hungry god. He's going to the High Council, Islay whispered, wiping soot from her face. He's going to use the shadows to kill the elders and claim the throne before I can prove who I am. Then we don't wait for proof, Lachlan said, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. We hunt him down, not as a king and a queen, as wolves. The bells are ringing for a funeral, Lachlan, but I don't think it's ours. Islay stood at the base of the great cathedral, the spiritual heart of the High Council. The ancient stone structure sat atop a jagged cliff, overlooking the lights of a city that had no idea it was about to be devoured. The sky above was a swirling vortex of black smoke and violet lightning. Hamish hadn't just come here to kill the elders. He had turned the cathedral into an antenna, broadcasting the signal of the unbound to every dormant shadow in the Highlands. Lachlan stood beside her, his transformation nearly complete. His fur was as black as the night, his amber eyes glowing like twin suns. He let out a low, vibrating growl that shook the gravel beneath Islay's boots. The elders are silent. Lachlan's voice echoed in her mind through their bond. The shadow has already breached the sanctum. If we don't stop the ritual, the city becomes a feeding ground. Islay didn't need a weapon. She raised her hands, and the violet light in her veins pulsed so brightly that her skin appeared translucent. Then we break the antenna. They stormed the heavy iron doors. Inside, the cathedral was a nightmare of frozen history. The elders sat in their high-backed chairs, but they weren't dead. They were encased in black ice, their expressions frozen in masks of eternal shock. At the altar, Hamish stood with his arms outstretched. The black smoke was no longer leaking from his eyes. It was pouring from his chest, connecting him to the massive silver crucifix above the pulpit. You're too late, Auntie. Hamish's voice was a distorted roar, 1,000 spirits speaking through one throat. The unbound have been hungry for 1,000 years. They don't want a throne. They want a feast. The black smoke surged toward them, forming into solid lances of shadow. Lachlan lunged, his massive claws shredding the darkness. But for every shadow he tore, 2 more emerged. Islay ran toward the altar. Her boots clicked rhythmically on the marble floor. She felt the cold of the unbound trying to slow her heart, but she channeled the memory of the dual monarchy. She wasn't just a seer. She was the daughter of Alistair, the rightful Alpha, and the wife of the man who had burned his own hand to protect her. Hamish, look at me, Islay shouted. Hamish turned, his face a hollowed-out ruin of the boy she once knew. You called me a commoner, Islay said, her voice dropping to a deadly calm. You call me a charity case. But I am the only thing standing between you and the void. She didn't use a shield. She used her power as a vacuum. Instead of pushing the violet energy out, she pulled the black smoke in. She acted as a lightning rod, drawing the shadows away from the silver crucifix and into her own body. Islay, no, Lachlan roared, pinning a shadow beast to the floor. You can't contain them all. They'll tear you apart. I'm not containing them, Islay gasped, her skin turning a terrifying shade of bruised purple. I'm grounded, Lachlan. Take my hand. Lachlan understood. He leapt to the altar, his massive paw catching her bandaged hand. The amber light of the Alpha and the violet light of the Seer collided in a blinding explosion of white-hot energy. The bond acted as a circuit. The black smoke passed through Islay, but instead of rotting her, it was purified by the Alpha's heat and the Seer's light. It was forced back into the earth through the cathedral's foundation. Hamish let out a final, soul-shattering scream. Without the shadows to prop him up, his body began to wither. The silver crucifix above him shattered, the shards raining down like metallic snow. The ritual was broken. The black ice around the elders vanished. The smoke cleared, revealing a morning sun that finally broke through the Highland mist. Hamish lay on the marble floor, a frail, broken man with white hair and empty eyes. He wasn't a wolf anymore. He wasn't even a man. He was a husk. Islay collapsed against Lachlan's chest. He had shifted back to his human form, his breathing ragged. He held her tight, his heart beating a frantic rhythm against her ear. "It's over," he whispered. "The unbound are sealed. The city is safe." The elders stood up, their faces pale as they looked at Islay. Morag, the eldest, walked toward her and bowed so low her forehead touched the cold marble. "The proof of the scroll is gone," Morag said, her voice trembling. "But the proof of the spirit is undeniable. Islay MacAlister, you are the true Luna, and this pack is yours." Islay looked at the broken body of Hamish, then at the city below. She looked at Lachlan, the man who had started as her captor and ended as her soul's anchor. "We have a lot of work to do," Islay said, her voice finding its strength. "The old world is watching, but they should know one thing." She turned to the windows, the sunlight catching the violet glow in her eyes. "The Highlands belong to the wolf, and the wolf belongs to me. The snow is finally melting, Islay. It's a good day for a coronation." Lachlan's voice was warm, a stark contrast to the biting wind that had defined their first months together. Islay stood on the high balcony of MacAlister Manor, looking out over a transformed landscape. 6 months had passed since the Cathedral of Ash. The iron gates that once kept the world out were now wide open, and the village below was thriving under the new trade agreements she had drafted. She adjusted the silver lace cuffs of her gown. She didn't wear the dark metal of the old regime anymore. She wore deep violet, the color of her own power, which had settled into a steady, comforting hum beneath her skin. "It's not a coronation, Lachlan," Islay said, turning to him with a playful smirk. "It's a board meeting. We have 3 new pack houses to fund and a scholarship program for the orphans in Edinburgh." Lachlan walked toward her, looking every bit the Alpha in a tailored charcoal suit, though his amber eyes still held that untamed spark. He slid his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "You've turned a clan of warriors into a clan of philanthropists. My father would be spinning in his grave." "Good," Islay whispered. "Let him spin. We're building a future that doesn't require a heartstone to keep the peace." The manor had changed, too. The black cells had been filled in with concrete and turned into a wine cellar. Lady Mary had been exiled to a remote island under the watch of the High Council, her power stripped. And Hamish was a ghost of a man, living out his days in a quiet sanitarium, his memory of the unbound, and Islay, wiped clean for his own sanity. A familiar voice called out from the doorway. "If you two don't stop acting like a romance novel, we're going to be late for the ribbon cutting." Poppy stood there, looking far more confident than the girl in the yellow raincoat. She was now the official liaison for human affairs at MacAlister Global. She held a clipboard and was dressed in a sharp blazer, her eyes bright with the excitement of her new life. "We're coming, Poppy," Islay laughed, stepping out of Lachlan's embrace. They walked through the grand foyer, where the portrait of the usurpers had been replaced. Now, a massive painting of Elspeth and Alistair, Islay's parents, hung in the place of honor. They were smiling, finally recognized as the true architects of the MacAlister legacy. As they reached the front steps, the MacAlister wolves, no longer just soldiers, but a community, let out a collective, rhythmic howl of greeting. It wasn't a sound of fear. It was a sound of belonging. Lachlan took Islay's hand as they prepared to descend to the waiting cars. He leaned in, his breath warm against her ear. "You did it, Islay Vance. You came here for revenge, and you ended up with a kingdom." Islay looked at the ring on her finger, the violet stone catching the morning sun. She thought about the girl at the doorsteps of the corporation, crying over a breakup text. That girl felt like a stranger now. I didn't just get a kingdom, Lachlan, Islay said, her voice clear and proud. I found a home. She looked out at the highlands, her eyes glowing with a faint, beautiful purple. The shadows were gone, the debts were paid, and for the first time in her life, the horizon didn't look like a threat. It looked like an invitation. Let's go, she said, stepping forward. We have a world to lead.